When I started becoming aware of my own spiritual awakening, on most days I sat on the edge of my bed thinking I must be losing my mind. In this video, we're going to talk about symptoms of spiritual awakening and some practices to assist with this journey. So stay tuned.
Well, hi there and welcome. My name is Remy, like Do-Re-Mi. I'm a best-selling author and creator of the Get Unstuck Revolution. I help extraordinary women with big-ass dreams just like you who want to get unstuck from a life that doesn't work and get to where you know you need to be, into a life that's filled with passions and purpose. Now let's get started with today's episode.
Okay, let me jump off the screen here and change over to my laptop. Today, we're talking spiritual awakening, what the symptoms might be, and some practices to help you with this transition into being even more spiritually awake than you already are. We talk a lot about overcoming ego thinking, and this is certainly part of it. This is a big, big topic, so I'm going to try and break it down into some very simple success principles, because if you aren't getting the success you want in full abundance, however you identify with success, and if you're wanting to tap into a greater knowingness and align with higher frequencies so that you can attract the success you're craving, then this episode is for you. Maybe it's time to open up to your hidden power and create something unimaginable, something totally unreasonable, something that maybe even seems impossible, to kick your whole life and all your success into high gear for whatever success means for you. And today, I'm going to try and get you one step closer. As business owners, change makers, thought leaders, innovators, disruptors, or even if we haven't found the right fit in the world yet, whether we're talking about our relationships at home or at work, or when we're talking about our finances, sometimes we find that we're moving away from success. So how do we overcome this? How can we find the clarity and courage we need so that we can unlock our hidden power? Well, it's time to be unabashedly, unapologetically, happily untethered to the ego thinking that can sabotage our success. It's time to tap into our soul connection instead, so we can broadcast our hidden power from the hilltops and advance our soul's agenda. This episode today is for you if you wonder how to let things be and not get tangled up in the negative energies that keep you from a spiritual awakening, how to find the elusive answers that are right there at the very core of your being, and whether time moves forward or does it move straight up. Yes, these episodes are about how to find your hidden power when you want to transform challenges into successes. I like to call it the audacity of alchemy. Because when we're feeling stuck, it's never the situation that has us stuck. It's our energy that's become stuck in doubts, worries, frustrations, indecision that can come from life's challenges, especially because of a spiritual injury we've experienced, some kind of hidden trauma that's interrupting our soul's work. We can dissolve the obstacles in our path with a simple shift in energy. We can get out of doubt and move on with our life because our choice of frequency changes the course of our journey so that we don't get stuck in the negative vibrations that block our success. These positive energies that we talk about so much are where we find the magic of alchemy, and using our hidden power means using these positive energies to effect transformation. So let's get started with today's episode. You know, when I started becoming aware of my own spiritual awakening, on most days I sat on the edge of my bed thinking I must be losing my mind. I was beginning to hear things in my head that I couldn't explain. I thought I must be having a psychotic break, or at best, a brain tumor. This all turned out to be something new for me, intuition. But it was more than that. I'd never really felt like I had much intuition at all, and now I was also having cosmic glimpses and mystical experiences on top of this new sixth sense. Not only was I feeling flocks of angels around me, but I was also getting visits from other people's guides. I had 3 monks that followed me around in the park. They weren't mine. They belonged to someone else, but they wanted to get a message and they were trying to use me. I was also getting downloads from the Akashic Masters, and even a personal visit from an archangel. How was I now living inside some crystal ball? It took a very long time to begin to accept this and not think I was just crazy. I mean, if you had shown up at my front door with a straitjacket, I'd have probably willingly gone off to the loony bin. Now, this was all very unnerving for me because I've always been a very pragmatic person, especially when it came to success. I didn't like getting a peek at any other realities besides my own. I was real world grounded. I didn't like things that were intangible. I liked facts and figures and things I could prove and justify, not analytical. It was just that I liked living in a world where things were tangible. Now, at the same time that I was beginning to hear things from spirit, I was also beginning to feel things, vibrations and uncontrollable shaking, cramps in my legs and feet, undeniable panic, too much pressure in my head. There was even a time where I had this obsessive itching and absolutely nothing visible on my skin. It got so bad that I was waking up with blood on my sheets from scratching in my sleep. So I finally had to go to a doctor because it was all out of control. And after a battery of tests, they could find absolutely nothing wrong with me. I somehow knew it was all energetic when I went in, but I also hoped upon hope that they could find whatever it was that was making me scratch uncontrollably. Well, this all turned out to be symptoms of a Kundalini awakening, or as I like to call it, more weirdness that I had to try and embrace. Once I started to research spiritual awakening, you can't imagine the relief that I felt knowing that I wasn't losing my mind. Although with everything that I was going through, maybe losing my mind would have been a little bit easier. If something like this began to happen to you, these changes that come about emotionally, mentally, or physically, would you be ready? Would you be ready for a spiritual awakening? Are you ready now and just don't want to go through all the emotional, mental, and physical torture? And how can all this blend with your real world success and not end up being a huge distraction? Well, this is a big topic, bigger than I've ever imagined. So I'd like to just keep this on the simple side. I'd like to talk about 7 simple practices that we can begin to master in preparation for a spiritual awakening or to make the process of being spiritually awake a little easier in the real world. And as we get started with the first principle, I just want to point out that the last principle, number 7 there, will both open and close the loop of this spiritual teaching. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. So let's get started. But while I'm thinking about it, let's do a quick minute of housekeeping before we get on a roll with these 7 spiritual practices. Because if you're someone who likes to create with purpose, if you're someone who likes to be a conscious creator, then I just want to take a minute for this little reminder before we get rolling. If you already know that you're ready to dissolve life's obstacles that are on your path to success, if you already know that you're ready to do your soul's work and be a creator, then you might be ready for this amazing new tool to get you moving into some better patterns and frequencies where success can find its way to you. It's called the Alchemy Matrix, and it's going to help you, as they say, create your destiny. It's a perfect overlay to the spiritual awakening that we're talking about today. This is an interactive roadmap designed to help you solve problems, dissolve barriers, heal spiritual injuries, and bring in a lot of clarity so that you can create a future that you'd like to see. I just wanted to give you a brief reminder that you can sign up to learn more about the Alchemy Matrix at successcircleworkshops.com, and I promise to tell you more about that in just a minute. So here we go with today's 7 principles around spiritual awakening. And here's number 1. Let things be what they need to be. I work with a lot of people who have suffered a spiritual injury, some kind of trauma. It could be physical or it can also be emotional. It might even be something from a past life that they can't quite put their hands on. I have some clients who have come out of a cult and some clients who are on their twin flame journey toward ascension. And sometimes in these situations, there are signs of what therapists have labeled as codependence. Now, one of the trademark signs of codependence is a struggle with just letting things be. Sounds simple, but sometimes it's the most challenging to just let it go. Even if we are completely healthy with no spiritual injury at all, and even if we've lived perfect childhoods and we've had 100 lifetimes that have been perfect and full of joy, one of the practices of spiritual awakening or of being spiritually awake is a very centered approach of just letting things be what they need to be. There are parts of our journey that we are 100% responsible for and other parts that are simply subject to randomness Or maybe they're subject to a spiritual contract that we made before we ever got here to Earth. And I'll tell you what I mean. I don't talk about this very much, but I had a big contract with my ex-husband. He had been so abusive to me in so many lifetimes, and this was his lifetime to make amends. And the funny thing is, I tried everything to get out of that marriage, and it was like I was glued to it. I couldn't get out of it to save my life. And as it turned out, Spirit told me one day to just step aside and let things be, that he had to complete this amends project for his side of the karma. We had a contract to wrap this up once and for all in this lifetime. These karmic relationships that we find ourselves in often have one end result that they're asking for. They're asking us to step outside of any negativity and not participate in whatever form of abuse is in front of us. When we remove our frantic energy about it, when we stop being part of the problem and find the positive or find the blessings within it, things can shift. Now, we're going to talk more about this when we get down to number 7, which ironically circles right back around to this particular practice. So let things be what they need to be is lesson number 1. Nothing is constant. Things come and they go. Allow things to flow in complete accordance with their intrinsic nature, especially when we can't see what's behind the scenes in another person's spiritual growth. We often can't see what's in our contract with them. We all have one thing in common. We're all here for growth and awakening, even the people who seem to be abusing us. So let things be what they need to be. Just stay out of the negative energy cycle. And here is principle number 2. The elusive answers aren't that elusive. At our very core, we always have the answer. We may not be able to get our head around it just yet, but if we look at who we are and who we're becoming, and if we stay true to our morals and values, we'll somehow have a victory every single time because we're allowing our true selves to unfold. We're allowing the universe to guide us. We're letting go of illusions and negative ego thinking. At our very core, we don't have negative emotions. At our very core, we hold a spiritual perspective. We are compassion and patience and grace. That's who we are in our spiritual center. And if we hold ourselves to these higher frequencies of light, then right there in the light, we can find the answers we need because they're right there at our very core. It's when we allow the frustration and panic of ego thinking that we can become so blind to the answers that are already there. So be who you really are at your spiritual center. That's number 2. And that's you being you, a creative vibrational being who can use positive energies and not get stuck in the negative vibrations that block our success. That higher vibration is who you are. It's your hidden power. And from that perspective, the elusive answers aren't that elusive. Now here is spiritual practice number 3. What you don't want is asking you what you do want. What you don't want is asking you what you do want. We live on a planet of resistance, of dualities, of right versus wrong, light versus dark. In every moment of every day, we see these differences, these opposites between what we want and what we don't want. The key to overcoming these conflicts and challenges is to use them to see the contrast between what we want and what we don't want so that we can design our next steps. But all too often, we allow ego's negative thinking to distract us. We get caught up in our deepest fears and frustrations, our indecision, and sometimes our anger. And then we can go off on a tangent, sometimes for days, sometimes for years, about a conflict. We're being asked to look for the positive, to look for the blessings, and to turn the energy around and begin to look for what we want instead of looking at how wrong it all is. So use the conflicts and challenges that we find throughout life as a tool to design what you do want. That's number 3. Now let's move on here to number 4, and that is to explore your inner world. When we know others, we simply have information, but when we know ourselves, we can develop wisdom. When we know others, it's simply information, but when we know ourselves, that's where we find the wisdom. Information from the outer world doesn't do us a lot of good if our inner world remains unexplored. We want to give ourselves time to get to know our dreams and desires, who we are, and what we stand for. I'm not saying that time with others is a bad thing, but exploring the self is equally important. Time for soul searching affords us the opportunity to explore things that are intangible and uncovers things that may be concealed in the darkness that need to be brought to light. So that's number 4. By shedding light on our inner world, we can shed light on our wisdom, our intuition, our values, and what we really want from life. Let's see what principle number 5 has for us. Clinging keeps us stuck. As we talked about before, nothing is constant. Things come and go. Nature brings us what we need, and when it no longer serves our highest and best good, we can let it be what it needs to be for the next iteration. When we cling to things, whether it's people, situations, or ideas, it's more difficult to be in the flow. Let me say it a different way. We may be in a fast-moving river, clinging to a rock or a branch, and all the debris in this fast-moving river may just beat us up. If we climb up on the riverbank, though, now we become a casual observer as all the debris just goes on by. In other words, we can stand on the riverbank and see all that no longer serves us. We can observe and see the differences between what we want and what we don't want. We can have this other perspective, and not only that, but we can also just turn and walk up a different path. We can't do that if we're clinging to people, situations, ideas, outdated values, or even if we're clinging to our deepest fears. Remember the old saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So this is number 5, clinging to what no longer serves us, including outdated values, keeps us stuck. Maybe we're meant for more. It would be nearly impossible to know what that is if we're clinging for dear life to all the debris that may be beating us up. So let's have a look here at principle number 6. One of my favorites. Time doesn't necessarily move forward. Sometimes it moves straight up. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Do you remember the movie When Harry Met Sally? There was a line in it that I just loved. When you realize that you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible. For me, when I find that something's a fit, I'm ready to rush in head first. But I've always tripped over timelines. I find a goal that I'd like to accomplish or a particular success that I'm looking for, and it seems that things don't move fast enough for me, or they don't move at all. Other times I thought projects would go in a certain forward direction, and then they seem to just make a 180, and then they drag me along sideways on a high-speed sled. I had one particular thing that I really, really, really wanted, and it just seemed to be on its own time frame. Its own stupid time frame. And it finally became so frustrating that I just wanted to give up and put it all behind me. But my own angels told me, wrong direction. The timeline doesn't run in front or behind you, they said. It's straight up. My angels told me that I needed to raise my vibration straight up. I needed to raise my frequency higher, and that's what would move things along. So this is number 6, one of my favorites. Some things just can't be rushed because it isn't always our timeline or any timeline at all. Sometimes things aren't meant to move forward. Sometimes the universe is waiting for us to ascend, to change our energy to a higher frequency in order to find out the more that we're meant for. And here we are at our last one, number 7. Well, we've talked about this before. Problems are only an illusion. It won't surprise you to find this last practice on this list because we talk about it so much here. Problems are swimming in resistance, and if we don't give them our attention, they can literally melt away all on their own. But when we do give these problems our attention, more and more resistance builds up, and then it becomes more and more challenging to get out of it. Problems and challenges can only exist with our attention, or rather, problems and challenges can only exist with our resistance. Now, I'm not saying to be a Pollyanna. I never do, not by any means. And I'm not saying to ignore things like legal issues, but for the most part, anything we consider a problem is actually asking us to grow. There's a message underneath or behind that problem. It wants us to grow and expand. It seems like a problem that needs to be fixed, but that underlying message, it's about growth. And if we approach it as something that needs to be fixed, we may fix it right into its place where it won't budge because we're so fixated on it. So let's go back to that example of the river. If you'll notice, when you think about a river, water flows past every obstacle. In a river, water flows past every obstacle, every single obstacle, every single obstacle. That's why it's called flow. But we've been trained or brainwashed or somehow convinced that we have to tackle problems head on. But in doing so, we call in resistance. It just almost doesn't even make sense, but we can actually use the obstacle itself to overcome it. We can use the obstacle itself to overcome it. What do I mean by that? Well, think about martial arts. We've talked about it before, that when a force comes toward us, we step aside and the force goes on past. Because that force didn't hit us, it loses its power. And this is how we use the obstacle itself to overcome it. We simply step aside and let it be whatever it needs to be while we look at the energy behind the problem and correct the energy so that things can shift. Which brings us to kind of a full circle moment, since this was our spiritual law number 1 that we started with, to let things be what they need to be. So this is our last practice number 7, that problems are an illusion. We can just let them be whatever they need to be while we step over and onto a different playing field and create what we want instead. We recognize that the illusion is simply asking us to step up to our greatness, to see that we're meant for more, and that our success will be created however we create it. We can either create our life's experiences by getting caught up in negative ego thinking and attracting negative experiences, or we can simply say, I think I'd rather create some more positive outcomes, so I'm going to go over here with this different energy field and create something better than I'd ever expected. So, are you ready for spiritual awakening? I'll put all 7 principles here on the screen for you. Or we could ask the other side of that question, are you already spiritually awake? How are you doing as you look at these 7 principles? Because as we overcome negative ego thinking, these small practices here will become more and more important so that we can ascend to higher frequency thought patterns. So here's your exercise for today. As you look over these 7 practices, write down where you'd like to increase your capacity for spiritual awakening. Which of these would you like to increase your abilities for? Or maybe you've even thought of a practice you'd like to incorporate here that we didn't even talk about today. So your exercise is to look for where you'd like to increase your capacity for spiritual awakening. And that's your exercise for today as we create a flow of positive possibilities to fulfill your soul's work and the growth and awakening that your soul is seeking. And we create that flow for your success. All that's required from you is a shift in frequency, because your choice of frequency can change the course of your journey. And this shift toward a higher frequency is really what spiritual awakening is all about in so many respects. Well, I hope this helps you as you're using the powers of alchemy to transform challenges and obstacles into positive new successes. But if you still can't get your head around what's got you stuck, you can tell me about it right here. You can leave me a question, or if you're someone who has the audacity, the willingness to take bold risks, to transform challenges into success, you can find out more about our events at successcircleworkshops.com. This is where you can learn more about the audacity of alchemy and how to unlock your hidden power. You'll get a personalized interactive roadmap that's custom designed to get you unstuck by unlocking your hidden power to create big, magical changes. You know, alchemy. You'll learn to solve problems, dissolve barriers, and bring success to you. So don't wait. Go to successcircleworkshops.com and get your personalized alchemy matrix package right now. And here's what you'll get: a full color workbook filled with hands-on exercises to inspire your creative energies. You'll get membership in your very own success circle for high-level masterminding and networking, your very own customized alchemy matrix to unlock your hidden power and bring success to you, and your very own personal unstuckologist. Remember, the Alchemy Matrix is the only tool of its kind, and it's only available here. So if you're ready to approach your life's challenges with audacity, if you're ready to finally banish frustration, indecision, and the negative spiral, if you're ready to watch success materialize right before your eyes, then go to successcircleworkshops.com and get your personalized Alchemy Matrix package now and watch the magic start to happen. Thanks for joining me today, and I'm wishing you a life filled with all the alchemy you need to bring success to you. Feel free to share this video with anyone you know who's feeling stuck, and I look forward to seeing you in one of our upcoming Success Circles. You can find out more at successcircleworkshops.com.